Okay, so now we're going to get into physical disabilities. Physical disability, by definition, means a disability that limits a person's capacity to move, coordinate actions, or perform physical activities. Which, by the way, if you see the camera moving around, it's because I'm not very coordinated. Get into that a little bit later on. May also cause difficulties performing daily living functions, independent movement, and/or tasks that require motor skills. So, daily living functions, brushing their teeth, toileting independently, dressing themselves. Independent movement is like walking around. And tasks that require motor skills might include cutting a steak, tying your shoes, things like that. Characteristics of physical disabilities include paralysis, so no movement in the affected area, altered muscle tone, so that affected area of their body is weaker, an unsteady gait, which means that they don't walk very steady, they may have some internal rotation, loss of or inability to use one or more limbs, so they either have an affected limb or perhaps they're an amputee or they were born missing a limb, issues with gross motor skills, which includes walking and running, and then issues with fine motor skills. Some examples of that are buttoning their clothes, tying their shoes, typing on a computer, writing with a pen or pencil, and using scissors. Those are just some common examples. Potential causes of physical disabilities include genetic abnormalities, so something you're born with, trauma at birth. We'll get into that a little bit more later on in my case. Injury, so if they have perhaps a traumatic brain injury or they had to have a limb amputated, and then disease would be something like polio, is an example of disease. Types of physical disabilities include neuromotor impairments, degenerative diseases, and musculoskeletal disorders. Examples of physical disabilities include cerebral palsy, spina bifida, muscular dystrophy, poliomyelitis, bone tuberculosis, multiple sclerosis, paralysis, scoliosis, burns, fractures, arthritis, and deformed or absent limbs. Evaluation for a student with a physical disability is it's often diagnosed early on by a pediatrician if you have a child that's missing certain developmental milestones, such as not yet rolling over or crawling. A pediatrician may begin testing for certain physical disabilities, but that's only in the case of things like cerebral palsy. If you have something that was onset by obviously illness or injury, that's something that could occur at any point in the child's life. Okay, so this is similarities to English language learners. This one threw me for a loop for a little bit. I had to think hard about this one. But the similarities is that a student may have difficulty with handwriting. If they have issues with their fine and gross motor skills, they're going to have problems with maybe perhaps holding a pencil. So in that case, they might try to avoid writing altogether if they have issues with that. Issues with their arms or hands, they may not want to write. Their handwriting might not be the greatest. So they might, like ELL students, they might have some issues with handwriting and might try to avoid writing if they can. Classroom environment. The number of students with physical disabilities who are in general education classrooms has increased by 6% in the last decade, and that's actually a lot. 95% of students spend at least part of their day in a general education environment, and 63% spend at least 4/5 of their day in general education. Here's how we include students with physical disabilities in the classroom. You always allow the student to have their assistive device within reach if they have one. It is actually considered a fire hazard to not let the student have their assistive device within reach. It's understandable that we don't want them blocking any walkways with a wheelchair or something like a cane, but we also can't put their safety at risk by not allowing them to have it when they need it. in the case of an emergency. Always allow the student to leave at least 5 minutes early for anything that requires leaving the room, such as going to the cafeteria or the auditorium, just for an example. We don't want them getting caught in the hallway when the bell rings. They could be knocked over. It's a lot harder to move with or without an assisted device if you have a physical disability when you are in a crowded hallway full of students that like to push and shove to get where they're going. I know. Allow a student to make up any work that they have missed due to in-school physical therapy or occupational therapy. They will be asked to leave the classroom during the school day if they have in-school physical therapy or occupational therapy, and you must allow them to make up any work that they have missed without any kind of penalization. Do not ban the student from participating in special events such as going on a school field trip or auditioning for a school play because of their physical disability. That is discrimination. You always want to find a way to make it work for the student. You don't want to push them aside just because they take extra work to plan things like this. A student with a physical disability may have a one-on-one aide with them throughout the school day. And that's to help them out, carry their backpack, help them go through the lunch line, help them in the bathroom, help them stay on task, things like that.